that kind of movie.
Manners make it mad. We're going to stand around here all day, or are we going to fight?
Welcome everyone. This is episode 4 of the Comics in Motion podcast. I'm Chris Phelps, and my co-host is Mr. Dave Horrocks.
Hey guys.
Nice one, Dave. Just want to say big thank you to everyone over the last week. We've had some great feedback, interactions on the social media, and our audience is growing by the day, Dave. It's been quite astounding, really.
Yeah, absolutely. And we had in our own private discussions, you know, how much we thought we'd grow in those first few weeks and months. But so far, I think we're exceeding that. Yeah,
it's amazing. On a personal level, I'm really surprised. And I think the traction we've got and the nice comments, the feedback, the listens and the download figures have just been something we both couldn't have imagined, to be honest.
Yeah, it's been absolutely brilliant. And long may it continue. Setting us up for a nice big fall, I guess, but it's the pessimist in me. But no, all really good in these early days while we kind of experiment with different formats and things and try and figure it out.
Yeah, and I must admit, Dave, obviously we've both listened back to the podcast, and I've had a few people privately message me, and they like the scoring system. And I've sort of asked a few people what they think, you know, even if they've skated through the podcast or ever, say, look, just listen to the way we're scoring things. And at the moment, it's been positive. I'd like feedback from anybody who's sort of listened to download the podcast if that they feel it's the right way to go, because I like it. I think it's a good little twist on a 5 out of 5 format.
Yeah, we probably need to get a good spread now, don't we, across all 5 points.
Yes, I agree. And I just think it's one of them, like you say, it's a trial and error situation, and we've tweaked it slightly over the first 3 podcasts, it's changed slightly. And last week was a good testing one, I thought, for both of us, because it was going to the cinema and sort of trying to remember and enjoy the film, and then thinking, oh, I've got to review it, in the same thing. Yeah. The podcast, I found that really interesting. It's easy to come afterwards and read up on, Google's everyone's friend with things like this, but just to sort of give it that honest opinion. And I must admit, Dave, I'll hold my hands up here. I've been thinking about Black Panther a lot this week, and I really want to go and watch it again, because I'm happy to sort of change my review if I think I was being a bit too harsh on it. I'm getting that sort of...
That's interesting.
Yeah. I don't know whether that's just me going into it and trying to review it from a different point of view, but I am open to go. I really fancy going watching it again and then sort of giving feedback whether I was right or wrong. And the first one told me hands up if I've made a mistake. Yeah.
It would be interesting. And I guess because you'd watched it the day before, hadn't you?
Yeah.
And so you'd stayed away from everything leading up to that. I guess the pressure's on to remember it all for the next day, and plus getting a bit of research about the movie background and everything. So going in without that baggage, I guess you may enjoy it a little bit more.
Yeah, and I think as well is once we've put the review out there, it's easy just to go back and go, hang on a sec, I was being a bit too critical of everything that was going on. So I'll keep you updated on that, and all the listeners as well, if I do get a chance to get back to the cinema, or I do find it available on certain sites.
Yeah, that sounds good. And I think we did an okay job last time of we set out to keep the podcast shorter, didn't we? So it was definitely shorter than the previous ones. We'll continue to try and keep it on the shorter side, and we'll see how that goes.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we've all said this privately as well. We can't let the flow of what we're doing, with clock watching and stuff, but also we are aware that when people look at the downloads and that, and we've got a 3-hour podcast, unless it's something you've got a vested interest in, it's going to be hard to sit down in one go and listen to it. So we're trying to keep the content just as good, but we've, a bit less sort of scene by scene stuff, which we both agreed on, didn't we?
Yeah. And one of the things that we discussed last week, you'd mentioned that I think it was for the Bond scene, When they go down into the vault, if you like, and it was like a queue kind of thing, and shown through all the gadgets and whatever. You let slip that you hadn't actually seen Kingsman Secret Service.
Yeah.
And so coming out of that, I was like, oh, you've got to watch it. So that's what we're going to focus on today. And I'll find out how you get on with that, and if you enjoyed it at all. But I mean, lots of reasons why I wanted to do this one. Main one is I think it's a great movie. I think it's a great comic. But also, it's probably one of those where not everyone will know it's even a comic book movie. If you just go in and you just watch it, either get it on DVD or you watched it back on the cinema at the time, you might not know that it's based on a comic book property.
Yeah, you're right, Dave. I didn't realise it was a comic at all, a comic book series. And it opened my eyes. And when you suggested it, I thought, yeah, you're right, let's go for it. It's been on my radar for a couple of years, but never paid much attention to it, just thinking it was a bit of a comedy film, and how wrong I was. So, comic book wise, Dave, what sort of information have you got for us this week?
Okay, so this one's going to be a little bit easier probably than previously, because previously we'd gone back, several decades to look at the comic book properties, which were never really intended to be brought to the screen. Whereas this one, the comic book and the movie, this is born out of a discussion in the pub between Mark Millar and Matthew Vaughn, who were working on Kick-Ass at the time. And apparently, so the story goes, they'd been watching Casino Royale, and although they both enjoyed it, they were kind of reminiscing about the old Bond days and how, a lot of the fun had gone out of spy movies. So, they talked about working on something which was a bit more fun and, was very much in tribute to those old Bond movies. And also, one of the other comments they said was, Casino Royale, from their perspective, was an origin movie, but without an origin. You didn't really see him doing all his training and what have you. He's still very raw. But what they wanted to project was, going through that training before they become this polished spy.
Yeah.
So the idea for the movie and the comic was really hatched at the same time, and it's just a consequence of you can get a comic book out very quickly, or relatively quickly. It's a matter of months, whereas for a movie, it takes years. So the comic book actually came out around 2012. Matthew Vaughn is actually credited as co-plotter on the comic book. Oh, and right. You can actually see the story is not exactly the same, but the basic beats of the story are pretty much the same. And Mark Millar, I'm sure we'll be reviewing other movies based on his material. Other things that he's worked on, things like Wanted, Kick-Ass, I already mentioned, and he actually wrote the Marvel story for Civil War.
All right.
So, and he also he's got a little bit of a credit for the Avengers movie. I don't think he directly worked on it at all, but he created this story, this arc called The Ultimates, and that was a reimagining, a modern day reimagining of the Avengers. And Millar's, some people say Millar, some people say Miller. I don't know which one it is, so I'm just going to carry on saying Millar. He really writes in a cinematic way. His comic books read like you were watching a movie. And so in writing this ultimate story, apparently, the story goes, this convinced a lot of people that actually we could probably bring the Avengers to the screen. This kind of story, this length and the arc of it all works quite well. So he is quite renowned for that cinematic style. And it's not for everyone. I personally like it, but I think some of the comics community don't like it because it is a comic designed for being brought to the screen. Whereas, you look at some of the other comic properties and they have to be adapted quite a lot for the movies because if you just brought from what was on the page onto the screen, it would make a pretty terrible movie.
Yeah.
The only other thing I'd say, the artist on it is a chap called Dave Gibbons. Dave is probably about the closest to UK comic book royalty that we actually have. So he's probably most famous for working on Watchmen, but he was previously the comics laureate, which is basically he's promoted. It's quite a prestigious title. It only started with him back in 2014, and it's all about promoting literacy through comics. In terms of recommended reading, well, that's easy.
Yep.
If you go out, you can pick up the graphic novel for not very much at all, and it's a really nice self-contained story. Now, Millar, this was created under the Icon brand, which is kind of it's a branch of Marvel, so it's not really in the Marvel universe. You can see this is released by Fox, but it's designed for creator-owned properties. Yeah. So the characters and everything are really part of that Millar verse, which has actually been snapped up by Netflix in recent times. So yeah, nothing to do with Marvel really, other than just being part of this branch when it was released.
That's clever. I mean, I read as well that there's only six comics, Dave, in the whole series.
In that first story, yeah.
Yeah. I'd read that, obviously, just by researching over the last couple of days. It's really interesting because to gain so much traction in such a short space of time is quite unheard of, really, especially to go to the screen.
Yeah, but like I say, he's to get to that point, you know, in it would have been about 2010 when the idea was hatched. Millar had already been on a journey, and he'd already had a lot of these success stories, like say things like Wanted. Even though the movie was quite different to the book, he already had that kind of reputation as someone who can really write comics that can be brought to the screen. So it just and like I say, you basically have him and Matthew Vaughn, who's quite hot at the time as well, coming together and really working on this thing. And like I say, there's not that many examples when a movie will be made so quickly after the comic books come out.
I suppose that's like you say, it's a testament to his sort of stature and skill, really. Yeah.
Oh, he's a talented and very shrewd bloke as well. Like I say, he created this whole Millarverse, and actually, so it does kind of loosely. It's supposed to be set in the same world as Kick-Ass. So I think it was about volume 3 of Kick-Ass. They make reference to some of the kidnappings that are going on in the Kingsman sort of story. Right. So it's all part of this Millarverse. And like I say, he's managed to sell his whole company off to Netflix. So he won't be short of a few bob.
No. Knows what he's doing, that guy.
Yeah.
Unbelievable. Well, in terms of the film, a lot of the stuff you've mentioned has obviously been covered because they sort of intertwine together. The film stuff I was going to put together today is just sort of stats-based, really. I mean, the generic stuff, really. It was written by Vaughan, the screenplay, but also by Jane Goldman, Jonathan Ross's wife. Yeah. Obviously, it's based on the comics. You're going to like this, Dave, and this is a bit of an in-joke for anyone who's actually watched the film, or if you don't watch the film, or if you're going to watch the film after this podcast, you'll understand. But it actually premiered, Dave, at the But Num Afon Festival on the 13th of December 2014. Festival. I am not joking.
Where is that?
Honestly.
Fair enough.
And if you've watched the film, you'll understand that that's a very, very much an in-joke, that if you watch it to the end.
Oh, right.
Yeah, you get what I'm saying. It was released in the UK on the 29th of Jan 2015, and then in the States on the 13th of Feb. But it's actually Matthew Vaughan's highest grossing film that he's done. 414 million worldwide it's taken. So it's took a lot. And it was Empire. It was 2015 Empire Award for Best British Film. But the only problem was when it first come out, it received a lot of positive reviews by, the main sort of protagonist, the main review sites, things like that. But the sort of gore and humour, even the sexual sort of references and scenes, was panned by people as well. So it's very much a Marmite type film because of, and I sort of get that, but also you got to take it for what it is. It's a sort of James Bond stroke secret agent homage, maxed out and played out as like a comic, really. So they take that for what it is. But obviously they've done a sequel, which I'm sure will thingy at some point. But yeah, I think your description was great there, Dave. It sort of ticked off a lot of the boxes that I was going to bring in as well, because I think one doesn't come without another in a film like this, because they're all so closely knit together.
Yeah, and I don't think we won't often come across this same problem. Like I say, it doesn't happen that often where you basically have the comic and the movie so closely intertwined. But should we get into the review then?
Let's go for it.
We open up, don't we, in a scene in the Middle East. And again, one of the things I think is a theme throughout Vaughan movies, he just chooses great music, doesn't he?
Dire Straits, Dave. You can't go wrong with that.
Yeah, we open up to that Money for Nothing, and a nice overhead shot of the helicopter coming overhead and then just launching those missiles into this old kind of ancient looking building, and you're thinking, oh well, this is not a usual slow start to a spy movie. This is going to be action right from the start.
Yeah, straight in, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And we open up, there's obviously some kind of SAS type mission where they're going in and they capture this guy, and it looks like they're interrogated, and then straight away you sort of see in the interrogation there's no holes barred, is there? The fellow who's being interrogated has both of his knees shot out, and because he doesn't give the answer straight away, and they're not playing about at all, are they?
No, and I think as well it set the tone for me, because I did not have a clue that the film was going to be like this. And I'll be honest, Dave, I loved it. I loved that first scene. I just thought, oh, right, okay. It's not what I was expecting it to be. I thought it was going to be very, I know obviously it's a homage to the Roger Moore style of James Bond, but it was just like ramped up to 10 straight away. I was like, oh yeah, I'm going to like this, because it just settled with me really well, that first couple of scenes. Because you're thinking Colin Firth, you're thinking Love Actually, Bridget Jones, things like that, like this sort of haphazard type guy, and he's far from it. I know we only get a little snippet of him in there in that first scene, but it really set everything up for me nicely, I thought.
Yeah, we probably started off from a similar mindset. You're thinking, is this going to be like Love Actually for spy movies or something like that? And like I say, straight away they're right in there with the action, and I think that's probably deliberate. And I mentioned before the music, to that background of music as well. So yeah, absolutely brilliant start. And it's only, I've watched it a few times back now, but you don't really know what's kind of happening at first, but you see that, the guy who's just had his knees blown off, he's got a grenade on him, and he's managed to get the pin out. And there's a bit of a kerfuffle, and you see one of the party sort of jumps on top of him and sort of smothers the grenade and saves the rest of the party there.
Yeah.
And that's where we see, isn't it? We get introduced to Harry, so Colin Firth's character, and he basically introduces the other guy, says, congratulations, Galahad. So again, before you kind of find out about all the code names and whatever, I scratched my head like, what exactly happened there?
Yeah.
But yeah, so I mean, you've just watched it for the first time, so were you scratching your head a little bit as well about what was really going on there?
Yeah, the only thing I watched it thinking, great, this is to me, this definitely, straight away, it's not going to be what I thought it was going to be. I thought it was going to be a bit like Get Smart, like a sort of 60s joke sort of spy thing where he's a bumbling idiot. And honestly,
the original Casino Royale.
Yeah, just like a slapstick type thing, and it wasn't. And as I said before, and the one thing I couldn't understand is the coolness of them all, because I thought he's just gone here. What's happened? And then obviously it sets it over the whole thing because the gentlemen, aren't they? And it's like, welcome on board or whatever he says. And it was. I didn't get it, but I thought, right, I'm in on this already. I'm invested in what's going on. It sets it up nice. And obviously, the next scene we go from there is it's his dad. Obviously, he goes to the UK in '97, and it's Samantha Janice is the mother, Eggsy's mother, and he's Colin Firth there, obviously giving that medal to her, which is very much a 1990s bob she had there, Dave. I thought we were all. It's an old school, but I just thought it was a nice little scene. It was pretty cliche stuff that you'd see in these sort of films, to come back and later in years, like when you come back later on, and we realise obviously that he's Eggsy sort of thing.
Yeah, Harry seemed to really take responsibility, didn't he? He felt that he should have known this terror suspect he had a grenade, and the fact that Eggsy's dad's had to save everyone else. He seems to take that completely on his shoulders, and Samantha Janice obviously not best pleased. She obviously doesn't know what his actual day job is at all, does she?
No, obviously she wants her husband back. But yeah, I thought it was a nice little setup, and then especially in passing him. He's a medal in it, Dave. Is it like a medal?
I thought it was just a medal, and he gives her the code words. Is it Oxford, not bros? I think. Yeah. You sort of think, if that was me, I'd have to write it down. I think there's no way I'd remember that.
No.
So she's obviously not that interested. So he goes over and he meets a young Eggsy, doesn't he, at the time, and so hands it to him. Yeah,
really good, really good. And then the next scene is quite a good scene, actually. And obviously, this from the comic books. In the comic books, the inception was that one of the main plots was they were actually stealing celebrities, weren't they? But real life celebrities, and they were used in the comic. And one of the celebrities is Mark Hamill. So obviously they cast him in the film as obviously not as Mark Hamill, but as that sort of professor, didn't they?
Yeah, that's right. And so both characters are in the comic book, and again, that opening scene is just brilliant, and basically, like I say, there's a few artistic differences, few artistic choices which are different from the comic and the movie, and I kind of agree with most of them for the changes they made for the movie.
Yeah,
because the attempted kind of rescue that we see a little bit later it is very similar to the opening for the comic book, and we go through panels and panels where he's basically rescued Mark Hamill, and then he's the super cool kind of James Bond character, and then Mark Hamill's getting quite stressed about all the things that are happening, but he manages, he's fighting off all these hordes of henchmen and whatever, and he's super cool, ice cool Sean Connery style. And then they fly off the edge of this cliff, and Mark Hamill's going nuts, and he's going, don't worry about it, I've done this loads of times. And then it crashes at the bottom of the cliff. And then you just see this panel, from the top of the cliff, all the henchmen are looking down. And then the next panel, you see the parachute open up, and it's a big Union Jack. And one of the henchmen just says, "Nobody laugh." So I thought it read brilliantly in the comic, but it probably was a better choice the way they've gone here. But apparently, it was literally the last. It was the 11th hour. They'd kind of always intended to just check in with Mark Hamill and make sure that he was okay with using his likeness, so they're using his name, but obviously drawing him as well. And it got to the night before, apparently, that Mark Millar rang up Mark Hamill. He sort of knew him from a friend of a friend. They didn't know each other before. And then just the day before it went to the printers, that first issue, he just rang him up and apparently he was really nice about it. He just happened to be a massive fan of The Watchmen. So, massive fan of Dave Gibbons. So, yeah, he had no problem with it. And then, was more than happy to be part of the movie as well.
No, it's a great scene. And obviously we get Lancelot, don't we, come in. It's Lancelot, isn't it?
Yeah, it's
Lancelot, yeah. And that is fantastic. I mean, if you could ever get a sort of parody of Roger Moore, that guy is just perfection. And he's only obviously in the film for less than probably 2 minutes, but fantastic fight scene, everything. And I must admit, at that point, Dave, I was thinking, why is there no blood and stuff? Even though it was a real violent and real, proper bone crunching, everything was going on there. I was really surprised, thinking, and it didn't register with me till a bit further in the film what was going on, but I was thinking, it's a bit strange. And then, but I loved that line when he says, "Oh, whiskey, 62 Dalmot.
Yeah.
And then it's a knock at the door. He's obviously knocked at the door for the henchman to open. There's another knock at the door. We see a silhouette, and then the next minute, I didn't catch it the first time. You just see this sort of leg go across him, and you're thinking, what have I just missed here? And I'm waiting for someone, and then we get introduced to Gazelle then.
Yeah.
He grabs the whiskey and, Valentine's at the door, Samuel L. Jackson. But a little Easter egg there, Dave. Now, obviously, we skated over quickly the other week, the Bill Cosby situation, but the actress who played Gazelle, obviously in the comics, was a male character, wasn't it?
That's right, yeah.
It was actually it was offered to Oscar Pistorius, the part, and he decided to concentrate on the Paralympics and refused the part. And obviously from there, a couple of months later, he had to, obviously, he got done for shooting his girlfriend. But that's a bit of a weird Easter egg. I know, a bit of a sad one. He was actually up for the part originally, and he decided to change it to that lady. The lady was actually in the Nike adverts.
Right.
So I know, not a great
dodge bullet there, isn't it? Really?
Yeah, just a little bit.
Been quite nasty there.
Yeah, that's a bit of a strange one, but yeah, that's a great scene. What did you think of that scene, Dave?
It was brilliant, and again, it just takes those old Bond movies, doesn't it? That coolness of the spy. He's got everything under control. He just takes out all those henchmen. And you think, this is a guy who's got it all under control, and then you just see him get sliced in half. And for me, I was like, well, didn't expect that.
No. I actually thought it was a waste of his character, because he looked like he's going to be a good character, this guy.
Yeah, I think both Millar and Matthew Vaughn, they do like to shock a bit as well, don't they? So they'll give a bit of misdirection. It's like, this guy, you instantly like him. He's very, very competent, good at what he does. We know the actor, quite famous, or don't know about famous. He's been in lots of things. Can't remember his name right now. It'll come back to me at some point. But yeah, and it's funny, with you saying about the lack of blood, it's obviously an artistic choice, isn't it? And it made it, for me, a bit more comic booky.
Yes.
So not this particular comic book, because there's quite a lot of blood in that, but it made that bit a little bit more comic booky. And then, maybe it's to make when we get to the church scene later, stand out a bit more.
Yeah. And Dave, I'll be honest with you, I was watching it thinking, brilliant, I love it, what I was watching. And then there's a scene we'll get to at the end, and all of a sudden the penny dropped, and I thought, yes, that is perfect. I just thought that what they did watching it again, and I've got it running again as we're talking about it in the background, is it made so much sense because it's based on a comic book, and that artistic license means they can do whatever the hell they want. And I just thought it was brilliant. I did. And I agree with you. Such a nice little twist on it. When you watch it through, it makes perfect sense.
Mm-hmm.
Great.
And I think we kind of so we can see that Mark Hamill's character, the professor, he's been held hostage, but we don't really know why, and they're not giving him the rough treatment at all, are they? He's being quite well looked after, and when Samuel L. Jackson, old Valentine, comes in, he's being quite nice to him, isn't he? So you're not really sure at this point what is his motivation at all, but you do know straight away Gazelle is your kind of odd job, isn't she? She's pretty handy there.
Yeah, you don't mess with her.
No, not at all. Yeah. But obviously with Lancelot going out, then we're in the same position. Kingsman needs a replacement.
Yeah, and then we get one of the first pub scenes where he steals the car because he has a bit of an altercation with his stepdad's sort of henchmen who look like they've stepped off like a 1980s football hooligan film, and they're all together. But what was funny, Dave, that scene when he steals that Subaru, the yellow one, it's actually a homage to James Bond, For Your Eyes Only. Because you remember the scene with Roger Moore when he's driving the Citroen is it 2CV, the yellow one, and he's going backwards, getting chased by people. He ends up rolling it down the hill, and it's like that he gets battered, the car, and Roger Moore's there with the girl, with his sort of the girl with the black hair, and that's what this scene was about. The reversing down the street thing was a little homage to that, which is quite interesting. But yeah, so you get that, he then gets arrested. But Dave, more importantly, decides his phone call he's going to make is the Brogues. Is it Oxford's Not Brogues?
I think it's Oxford's Not Bros, isn't it? Or something like that.
Yeah, I think it's Brogues in it. I might be wrong. Yeah, Brogues, because I think he mentions the Brogue shoes. I could be wrong. You could be right.
No idea.
Yeah, it's something like that. Anyway, we'll research that one. But he says that. But what's quite funny, Dave, now we mentioned him last week, but the policeman interviewed him was the Fincemeister General. He Finchy off The Office. I'm very, very impressed with that.
Yeah.
So he gets...
Pretty small part for him, isn't it?
Yeah, it was, but I was happy with that because we did get a bit of office-based stuff in there. He rescued, obviously, Colin Firth then comes to get him, Harry comes to get him, and then we get probably the second best scene for me in the whole film, the pub scene.
Yeah, I mean, at this point, you're still thinking Colin Firth. He does the gentlemanly stuff so well, and we've been introduced to Eggsy and his whole background. He's got a fairly distasteful stepdad, hasn't he? He's got a pretty modest surroundings, in the council flat that he's living in. But you see that he's got that kind of, I don't want to say heart of gold, but I can't think of any other term for it at the minute. He obviously likes his little, is it brother or sister?
Sister, I think. Yeah.
So he likes his little sister, and he has a little interaction with her, and then he crashes the car because he's trying to avoid a fox. So you can see that this is not a bad person, and obviously he's poles apart from not just what we know about Colin Firth in this movie, but everything we've seen in our lives up to now with Colin Firth in it. He's just that English gentleman, isn't he? Yeah. And I can't think what is the actual line he says, and I just thought, for me, it was almost the best line, because he takes that English gentlemanliness, and ramps it up to 11.
Now, is this the line? Because I told a couple of my friends in a WhatsApp group I was reviewing this and never seen it, and one of them come back with this line, and I didn't have a clue what it was. He just put it, with dingy around it, quotation marks, and I was thinking, and it was "Manners maketh the man," and I was thinking,
well, that comes after, doesn't it? The bit that I'm talking about is where he basically says, whatever your beef is with Eggsy, and I'm sure it's well founded, I'd like to finish my lovely pint of Guinness.
Oh yeah. Brilliant.
And they're all looking at him like he's from another planet.
Yeah.
And it's like, you better get out of here, Grandad. So he looks as if he's walking out, and that's when you get that line, isn't it? Manners maketh the man. When he locks the doors so no one can get in, and then he just unleashes a big can of whoop ass, doesn't he?
Yeah, but in a nice English stately way, and absolutely sets the tone for who he is. So he's just like you said. As I always say, he's taken names, but he's wearing an absolutely astounding suit, and you can't argue with that. I just thought he's a brilliant Dave, absolutely brilliant, and it really was.
The camera work and everything. I mean, I'm sure, there must have been a stuntman in there somewhere.
Well, what they've said is, Dave, sorry to interrupt, he did 80% of his actual stunts.
That's pretty impressive, isn't it?
Yeah, well, he trained for like 6 months, and he's 53 when this came out. So he was in like absolute peak condition, 6 months in the gym of training, getting fit. And then he had obviously proper combat training and stuff, but he refused to have a stunt double as best he could. One of the reasons for that, though, was as well, Matthew Vaughn decided to shoot the film centrally. So what that means is that's why you're getting all the action scenes. You don't get a lot of blur and stuff. Everything that happens on the screen is in the middle of the actual on the film is in the middle of the screen. And as I watch it now, it's right. So everything is centralized. So, and it makes a big difference. So it's one of the reasons they couldn't really have a stunt double in a lot of the scenes.
Right. Okay.
It said it's an interesting way to direct a film, but it's also a very good for the style of what it was about, especially with being comic book based. That's what they're trying to get, that sort of picture within the screen.
Yeah. And, the fact he's like almost like Jackie Chan. I used to remember from the old Jackie Chan movies where he's basically just using everything at his disposal to make either a weapon or defend himself. Bodies. He's got his umbrella that he first used to chuck a pint glass and knock someone out, and it's just brilliant. And then when he's getting shot at, he goes into a defensive move, and he takes the time to actually switch to stun, doesn't he? So he's at no point is he ever out of control. He's in control of the situation, and just absolutely brilliant.
Yeah. Excellent. I'll tell you what, Dave, I'll be honest, and I've watched this scene now twice since yesterday. That whole scene, everything about it, is probably one of the best scenes I've seen in a film in a long time.
Yeah, I mean, again, I think, I'm guessing for yourself, it would have been, I'm trying to think back to the first time I watched it. My jaw was just on the floor. It's just like, again, that's Colin Firth there, and it kind of looks like him, and that where the camera seems to be right in the thick of the action that you were just talking about there, it's just, wow, this is amazing.
Yeah, a brilliant, Dave. I'm watching it now, and I can actually see this centralized way they've captured it, and it makes sense now that I'm watching it, and I think that's what's engrossing about the film and sort of brings you in a bit more with the characters.
Yeah,
really good, really well shot. That brilliant.
So then, obviously, he takes out the barman, doesn't he? He's got an interesting little gadget there. He sets it to amnesia.
As you do, yeah.
Yeah, I thought it was brilliant. Again, just a little nod to the old 60s Bond, I think. But then obviously it's a massive surprise for Eggsy as well. He's like, what's going on here? And so then we kind of get introduced to Kingsman, don't we?
Yeah. And he takes him obviously to the house, which I must admit, it's very reminiscent of Professor X's house. I know it's based in the UK, but the way they set up and the little sign in the field, in the gardens and stuff, I thought, yeah, it looks like the X-Men's.
Doesn't he take him to Savile Row first?
Yeah, he takes it to Savile Row, and they go on the screen where he puts his fingerprint on the screen, doesn't he? And then they take him down.
Yep.
He asks him about the films. Now, there's a bit of
yeah.
There's an Easter egg there. He mentions Trading Places, which at the time I thought was a bit bizarre. Eddie Murphy, and Dan Aykroyd from the 80s, and he says, no, My Fair Lady. But later on, when Eggsy gets obviously the suit on, he does say a line that's out of Trading Places when he says, "You look good," and Eggsy goes, "I feel good." Or feeling good, which is what Eddie Murphy says when he gets the suit on and stuff. When they get to it, I don't know. It obviously must have been a fan.
Probably a little nod, yeah.
Yeah, a little nod. And obviously, he goes down then with Harry, and then gets taken to, the actual school where he meets all these sort of upper crust candidates, and we get introduced to Merlin again, which I thought he was a great character, Mark Strong.
Yeah, and again, I think you see a lot with the directors, don't you, working with the same people. So obviously Mark Strong was in Kick-Ass as well.
Yeah.
And I guess the main surprise is that Mark Strong just played an out-and-out good guy, didn't he?
He is good as a baddie, though.
He is good as a baddie. So, I was always waiting for him, especially when, we find out later that you might, some of the others might be playing both sides. You're sort of thinking, Mark Strong, I've seen this before. Yeah. he's a baddie. But no, he plays that kind of, hard but fair drill sergeant, doesn't he?
Yeah. And one of the little things with him is, his part, Matthew Vaughn wanted him to be Welsh, but he found the accent really, really bad. So he said, look, can I do him as Scottish? And he had to convince him to be Scottish. And that's where this sort of came from, his accent and everything, because he just couldn't manage the Welsh accent or do it justice. So he ended up becoming like a Scottish agent as such.
You know my usual line with things like this, Chris?
Go on.
Why? Yeah, it's Mark Strong. We all know it's Mark Strong. You know what he sounds like. It's the director's choice. He obviously wants it for some particular reason. I just don't know why.
Yeah.
What does being Welsh or being Scottish give that character? Maybe it's just it gives it more of a not an international flavour, but maybe it gives it more of a British flavour, other than just everyone speaks like Colin Firth. Maybe that's the reason why. Yeah,
I don't know. Or it's a bit of an ego thing, right? You're playing a Welsh person, and that's it. I don't know how these things work. I agree. It could be, because most of them are, other than Exit, most of them are sort of upper crust, sort of middle class, aren't they, sort of people? Yeah. So maybe it is, just give a bit of diversity in the dialogue. I don't know, a bit of a strange one. But that scene when he meets them all, I mean, I don't think you could get a more cliche bunch of people that have been to sort of private school, could you?
So I wrote them down because I thought the names, again, they're not by accident, but we meet Charlie, Digby, Hugo and Rufus. I mean, is there any more public school than that? I just don't think so,
Yeah.
But, it's very clear they single Eggsy out as being not one of them, but absolutely extremes. I mean, if you or I were in that room, we'd stand out as much as Eggsy, I think. So
yeah.
We get to meet Roxanne as well as one of the two girls who were there, but she's obviously getting some screen time. And at first, I up until the end of the movie, I'm thinking, this clearly a love interest, isn't it? But they never did that. They just they always just stayed as those kind of work colleagues, didn't they?
Yeah, and you'd think that usually when they've got a pretty girl, I know it's a cliche like that, but it is usually somewhere along the line she's going to have. They usually become a bit of a hindrance to the hero, don't they? Where they're torn, but she actually was a strong character in this film. I really enjoyed her part in it, and to be fair, they plucked her from sort of obscurity as they did with Eggsy.
Yeah,
Emma Watson was actually up for the part.
Oh, right.
From Harry Potter, and she didn't get it. They wanted two unknowns in the end.
Great choice.
Yeah.
I mean, how they pluck these people out of nowhere, I don't know. But, I mean, Eggsy especially, just because he's on screen more, I just think just absolutely brilliant find. I thought he absolutely nailed the role.
Yeah, he did. He was good. Well, I'll tell you who else was up for Eggsy's role. John Boyega. And he was down to the last three. Star Wars Finn out of Star Wars, the new Star Wars.
Oh, right, okay.
So he was actually. There was three of them. Obviously, he's called Taron Egerton, isn't he? The guy who plays Eggsy. But he was up for it. John Boyega.
Right. Probably watched Attack of the Block.
Yeah. It's weird. I mean, like you said, good fan. But I tell you what, Dave, I'm watching. This next scene really is the water scene, where they're all asleep.
Well, we get, just before that, we get told essentially that it's real, isn't it? So this is a very tough and ruthless selection process, and fill out your body bags. So, it's all real. This is not playing about, this is playing for keeps. And Roxanne tells Eggsy, "Don't worry about it. It's an old army trick. They're just trying to put the pressure on a little bit as well." And that's before we get into the flooding scene, isn't it? So sorry, I cut across you there. Do you want to take it up again?
Yeah, no. So what I was going to say about the flooding scene, Dave, is great little scene. Obviously, they all go for the toilet pipes and all that, to breathe. But what happened when they were filming this was literally the first week of filming. Something happened with the computer. There was a glitch on it, and the actual actors, I'm just watching it again, and as they're panicking, like they can't breathe, that's actually real. And he kept it in the film because they nearly drowned, and the actual people filming it, the cameramen and everything, who were underwater as well. They were supposed to be only underwater for a short amount of time, but something happened and it carried on and on. So when you see the panic on the faces when they're looking round, especially the ones who were obviously holding down the toilet pipe, the pipes, they were genuinely concerned. But Matthew Vaughn kept it in, which I didn't know that until I researched it. But yeah, that could have gone south, couldn't it? But again, I think it does an interesting thing, doesn't it? I mean, I couldn't help but kind of wince a little bit at the idea of having to breathe that way. Yeah. But, Eggsy's kind of, I think they're playing up, that he's had a bit of a troubled past, isn't he? And he kind of spots that it's likely a two-way mirror and decides to try and get out that way. He at the time, they're all disoriented and stuff, and they don't know that it's just a training exercise. So, he does quite well there to break through the glass. But of course, Merlin tells them, well, you've all failed because one of you's died over there. Yeah. And so again, just reinforcing that idea that, you could lose your life when you go in for this job. Yeah. And that's exactly. And I'll be honest, Dave, as well, that was a good scene because it also set it apart from a lot of these films when they do these sort of training montages where, obviously it's survival of the fittest and you've always got someone who's a protagonist who's supposed to be a good guy, but they've always got that edge, haven't they? And he's got a rival there straight away. And to see someone actually die there from that scene in the film, I thought was quite good because I thought that's not normally what you see. You usually see him beaten or someone giving up or whatever, but they actually killed someone off. I thought it was good. I thought it was quite a powerful little scene, that.
Yeah, absolutely. And like I say, for me, it made me think, oh, crikey, this is real then.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. But and different, just a different slant on the whole sort of secret agent genre of films as well. I thought interesting, really interesting.
Yeah. And then we get, again, a nice little moment. I wouldn't say it's one of my favourite moments, but it did make me chuckle genuinely, is when they pick out their dogs.
Yes.
And Eggsy picks himself out a pug, thinking it's I guess a puppy of a bulldog. But then gets told, it's not going to get any bigger than that. So that bit did make me laugh. And of course, when they're doing the running, poor little pug's tiny legs are barely going, and he sort of threatens to shoot it. But then again, kind of figures out a way of getting around they're given a set of rules that they can't break while they're going on this exercise. And he manages to shove the bug down his top, because he can't carry him. That's the rule. And, carries on the exercise. So again, nice bit of improvisation there to kind of get around the problem that he had at the time.
Well, in real life, Taron Egerton absolutely petrified of dogs.
Oh, really?
Yeah, petrified. He says, I've read an interview, he said, I'm a cat guy myself, but petrified. So one of the things with the little dog as well was because of his fear of dogs.
Did they give him a
smaller dog?
Genuinely a big bulldog the first time.
Yeah, they must have done, but that's exactly right.
Right.
He ended up with a little pug, so yeah. But it wouldn't have worked any other way than giving him this sort of little dog. If you'd give him a massive sort of bull mastiff or something like that, or British bulldog, I suppose, of him being gentlemen, it wouldn't have had any sort of credence to it.
Yeah.
So I thought it was a great,
very good.
Yeah, great little scenario.
And then we get into the parachute scene, don't we? So we get to see that straight away that Roxanne doesn't like heights, but then Eggsy sort of steps forward. Eggs are on a bit, no pun intended. And then Merlin has that line, doesn't he? You didn't think it was going to be that easy, did you? Especially when one of you. Something like he words it quite cleverly. He doesn't say one of you hasn't got a parachute, but he says Kingsmen need to think on their feet, and scenarios like if one of you doesn't have a parachute. So then, there's great editing and camera work I felt with this scene, because straight away, I mean, even when I've watched it a few times, my heart's going. When you sort of think, one of them's not got a parachute. What are you going to do? And I thought, again, it showed, Eggsy kind of stepping up as that leader and just trying to figure out, all right, what is it we do? And then some of the old toffs are like, right, so that I'm going to give mine a go and just make sure I'm all right.
Yeah.
And, but I just thought it was really great camera work there, and they end up sort of winning the challenge. They landed in the target there, didn't they? And he has a bit of a go at Merlin, and when Mark Strong's like, "Come and whisper that in my ear," I'm waiting for a big roundhouse to come around and clock him one. But no, he does even better, doesn't he? He pulls out his parachute and then just sends him on his behind, and just says, get that chip off your shoulder. So I just love this bit, everything about it, that intensity of when they're all dropping and they don't quite know what to do, and just how it finished off there with Strong just, making a bit of a monkey out of Eggsy.
Yeah, he was good. And this, obviously the close-ups of all the actors and actresses is CGI, but the whole scene was done in one take, but it was done by the Red Bull diving team.
Oh, right, okay.
What they call this scene, the one that Eggsy does with Roxanne, it's something called something like Old Bill or something, this scene, and it only works in certain situations where obviously you're relying on one person's parachute to deploy to save you, and it's a really, really hard technique. So the way they did it, it is a bit of camera trickery to get the actors in and the actress to obviously look real, but all the other stuff is a genuine one take, because obviously they had to have cameramen filming it as well.
Mm-hmm.
So really good scene. And I agree with you. I think it just brought that sort of, oh my God, one of them's going here, one of them's going.
Yeah.
And then, like you say, Merlin's brilliant. He sort of steals the film a bit as well, a bit like Shuri did last week when we watched Black Panther.
Yeah,
it's not as deliberate, but and sort of as funny. But what he does is enough. Like you say, you're sort of waiting for that sort of heel turn, and he's going to become a baddie, and it doesn't happen. So the whole thing is just played straight down the line, and it does. He makes a lot of the scenes because of his sort of pleasant jokes and sort of off the cuff things, I think.
Yeah. No, he is very good, and like I say, he plays a different character than what we're used to with him.
Yeah.
But I think for the gadget scene, I kind of half remembered this when we were talking last week, because I was sort of saying about the whole Q scene, they get shown around with the gadgets and everything, and this doesn't really just directly copy from Bond, does it? Because you don't have the Q character. It's just when they're going round and getting introduced to all the gadgets, it's just Colin Firth who's just introducing Eggsy to all these cool little toys and stuff. And of course they make a little reference about the iPads and whatever. But I absolutely loved, what was it? Do an impression of a German commandant.
Yeah, Basil Fawlty.
Yeah, yeah, no, with the heels.
Yeah,
but, just absolutely brilliant, and the old blade out the tip there again, very kind of old Bond, isn't it?
Well, that's what they said, that all the actual tools he's got at his disposal are either James Bond or Man from U.N.C.L.E. references, and that's exactly what they are. Every single thing you've seen in one way or the other, even down to the sort of knife in the shoe and things like that. They're all little references, the pen, everything. You've seen them all before, and that's the whole point of it. It was done deliberately to sort of... I think even an umbrella's been in one of them. I don't know whether it's a James Bond film or The Man from U.N.C.L.E. from the 60s, obviously a TV show, but they're all deliberately done.
If they haven't used an umbrella, I'm sure Sean Connery or Roger Moore must have had an umbrella at some point. It was just, those early Bond movies, just so unbelievably English, weren't they? So it must have been in there somewhere.
Yeah, it must. I mean, I think Sean Connery had them in the first couple. I don't know if it's Dr. No, he did have an umbrella, but I don't know whether it was just used in a fight scene or whatever, but he may have had it in one of the earlier ones.
Yeah. But one of the sort of the penultimate tests they have to. We didn't say, did we? So a couple of the candidates were taken out. They deployed their parachutes too early and what have you. So it's down to the final three. It's Charlie, Roxanne, and Eggsy.
Yeah,
and they have to go through the next trial, which is seduction. And they all have the same person, the same girl, and as they all sort of turn around the picture, and the thing that impresses me, Roxanne is pretty damn nailed on, isn't she, in terms of her focus, in terms of getting this position. Yeah, so she doesn't flinch at all. It's like, right, okay, we're going to have to seduce this girl, and then we go straight into that, and we get this bit of challenging, don't we? So they're all trying to use different techniques to win the affections of this girl. Yeah. And then you have the seedy looking bloke who's like, there's one way to guarantee it, and that's Rohypnol. So then we get, we see Eggsy, and he's tied up, and he's, again, we don't know that this is part of the trial at the time as we're watching it, but he's tied up, and there's a train coming, and, it's seeing Willie Blab, and then obviously it drops down. He doesn't get he doesn't get run over by a train. And I just love the way, Harry, Colin Firth, he's there when the train disappears, and he's like, right, should we go and watch the others do it? Yeah, okay. It sort of just rolls with it, doesn't it? It's like, oh, right, it was part of the trial. Nice one. But then Charlie, obviously, as we probably suspected, he just tells everything. And we actually find out he was, so all of the Kingsmen selected different candidates, and he was Michael Caine's choice, wasn't he? So, yes. He's not best pleased that he's out of the trial there.
Okay, he says to him, doesn't he, you can, get your own way out sort of thing.
Untie yourself. And then we get into the final trial, don't we, which is... you have to, this dog that you've been caring for a while, you have to shoot the dog. And, Eggsy can't go through with it.
Yeah. And
then we hear from the other room that Roxanne does actually go through with it. And then, of course, it was all a ruse. It was a test, but there was a blank in the gun. And so, looks a little bit silly, and old Colin Firth not too happy that, he failed at the final hurdle, essentially, and Roxanne is now the new Lancelot.
Well, they were actually, Dave, in the original scripts, it was Jane Goldman who decided to change it. They were actually going to kill the dog, and they just felt that because of the tone of the whole film, that was just going. She decided to bring it back. Matthew Vaughn wanted to go with him shooting the dog, and that's why they originally did film the scenes of him shooting the dog. They kept the scene in about Harry's stuffed dog because they had to change the dialogue slightly because he thought it had to be in when he says obviously he died from pancreatic cancer years later or whatever.
Yeah.
It's the same thing, but I get that. I don't think you could have. I genuinely don't think you could have, because it would have took the character down a totally different route. Would have been no compassion there, which I sort of get what they're trying for, but I don't think it would have added anything to the film, really.
No, I think that's a good choice, what they went with in the end. I think, again, we'd seen through the film, hadn't we, with avoiding the fox and whatever, that Eggsy's got that heart of gold, hasn't he? And I think it was a good choice. Whether it was a good choice to actually point the gun at Michael Caine or not, I thought that was a bit extreme, but... Yeah. No, I thought they did well there.
Yeah, it's a good scene. Very good scene.
So, I mean, should we have a little bit of a chat about Valentine? Because I think we've been drip-fed a little bit up to this point, haven't we? What is Valentine's actual motivation? So we've seen Samuel L. Jackson and Gazelle throughout the movie, but we don't really know what he's all about. And Mark Hamill plays, as you mentioned before, he plays this professor, and he's in the comic books as well. And I think it's, is it Gaia theory or something like that? This idea that global warming is all around, it's basically like the Earth's got a fever.
Yeah.
And there's nothing that we can actually do at all. It's just going to happen. So that's the theory, and the humankind is going to be wiped off the face of the earth as the earth tries to shed itself of the fever. So this is that Professor Arnold, who's come up with that theory, and this is one of the reasons Valentine wants to get him on the ark, kind of thing.
Yeah.
But Colin Firth's character, they come across this professor and goes off to interview him, and he finds out, Mark Hamill gets to the end there and his head blows off. And it's like, again, well, what's happened there? And obviously that takes Harry out of the game for a little while as well. And, by the time he comes around, he's sporting a nice sized beard there.
Yeah, and I must admit, when Mark Hamill's head comes off, it's the first little snippet, like you say, when they drip feed stuff regarding that sort of comic satire death thing, because when he dies, you get like this sort of off camera, but you get this weird stuff on his face, but his head comes off like with this weird cartoon sort of
yeah, it's very
explosion.
comic booky, isn't it?
Yeah, and that was the first time when I started going, did I just see that then? But I didn't rewind it. As I've watching it again, it's all making sense now why there wasn't as much gore and why there was these sort of little things going on. I thought it was lovely little touches, Dave.
Yeah, absolutely. But yeah, so we get more and more, and actually on Valentine as well. I believe that the whole lisp, because again, when Samuel L. Jackson, we know what he sounds like. When he starts speaking with that lisp, at first, first time watching it, it took me out of the story a little bit. But after a while, you just kind of get on with it. But apparently, that was Samuel L. Jackson's idea.
Yeah, he'd had a lisp but he was younger, didn't he? And
oh, really? I didn't know that bit.
Yeah, he'd had a lisp growing up, and he outgrew it when he got into acting. He worked through it, and what it was a bit of a homage to the James Bond films, because one way or the other, these James Bond baddies, they always have some sort of problem physically, and whether it's a voice thing or there's something wrong with them physically. So he decided to put it in, but he didn't tell Matthew Vaughn until the first scene. And
right.
He was having kittens, basically saying, "What the hell are you doing?" But he kept it in because when sort of Samuel L. Jackson convinced him why he was doing it, he thought people would understand the homage, because obviously the film's just like a James Bond sort of fan film, really, isn't it, in some respects? And he kept it in. And also, what he thought is, as well, for Samuel L. Jackson, he plays the same part, doesn't he? It's the same guy. Obviously, it's the same person, but his characters are pretty much generic, aren't they? It don't matter what film he's playing, whether he's Nick Fury or he's in Pulp Fiction. He's that aggressive guy in it all the time. Do you know what I mean? So he decided just to slightly change it. And I thought at first it did sort of annoy me, and I was thinking, oh God, this is going to do me head in. But like you say, as the film went on, it was also what they were saying in a lot of the stuff I've read is it was also one of the reasons why I think his character was so sinister, because he had to live with a lisp all his life, and he'd sort of been ridiculed, and that's one of the reasons he was doing it and became sort of like a genius.
Yeah. But I think I'd seen something with Jane Goldman who said they learned a little bit from working on X-Men First Class, in that Magneto, he's not sort of two-dimensional villain. You can kind of get where he's coming from and perhaps even agree with it. Valentine, he doesn't like violence. He says, he sees his own blood, he's going to throw up. So it's trying to give him that, philanthropic kind of idea that, he's just trying to save the planet, save mankind. Now, he can't save all of us, but he's trying his best. And I think that's an interesting idea. It's, to try and make it not such a two-dimensional villain. And I think they even say, don't they, that a little bit later, they say, the old Bond movies are only as good as the villain.
Yeah. Yeah, he does. He says it when he has that meal, doesn't he?
Yeah. So, I mean, we get to see again. He negotiates with the Princess of Sweden and the Prime Minister, and she's having none of it. Whereas he's like, yeah, it's about time politicians did something. Let's do this kind of thing. And but obviously, so she's not with it, but he can't let her go. Now she knows what the plan is, so that they have to lock her up, only to come back later. And we see that there's a list, isn't there? And there's a list, and it's got United Kingdom, and it's got a bunch of names there. And I wondered if I'm sure it was Captain America: Winter Soldier, where depending on which country you watched it, they switched in a different list.
Ah, right.
And I wondered, because it had United Kingdom, I thought, well, I wonder if you watch the, a US version of the movie or something, does it have a different list? I genuinely don't know.
Ah, that's interesting. I never knew that, Dave.
Yeah, so I'll have to look up, but I don't know offhand now. So yeah, one of the things I do love though about the Valentine character, he's obviously loaded. He's obviously got loads of money, but he's got no class. you know, so you have him up against the Colin Firth character, and he's just dripping with class, and the two of them end up getting together for dinner, don't they? And they wheel out this very fancy looking silver platter, and of course they lift it back, and it's like there's a whole bunch of McDonald's things, and without a pause or anything, he just says, "Oh, I'll have the Big Mac, please." Completely unruffled, unshakable, just completely goes with it.
well, you know what it's in homage to, Dave. Again, it all pans back to James Bond, but the whole thing is to do with James Bond, where they're always mentioning, what year a certain drink is, whether it be a whiskey or a red wine or whatever. But that actual scene when he says, I think it's in 1938, he's actually in The Man with the Golden Gun. And the whole thing is a bit of a joke towards that scene with James Bond. So that's where he, like you said, he doesn't even flinch. I think it's whatever. I don't know if he's serving lamb's eyes or something in The Man with the Golden Gun, but Roger Moore just doesn't even flinch.
Right.
And that's what that's about when he says, have a Big Mac.
Yeah.
It's really good.
It's brilliant.
And also, a little Easter egg for you, he's called Mr. DeVere, which Matthew Vaughan's real name is DeVere, but it's like an anagram of DeVere, and that's why he put it in there for some reason. I don't know what. Again, as you would say, why, but I don't know. But that's why he's called Mr. DeVere.
Fair enough.
Just a random one.
But obviously, at that meeting, at that dinner, that's where they laced his drink, didn't they, with some kind of nanotechnology, nano tracers or something, I think they said. So they could actually track where Colin Firth was going and everything. And that's where they kind of track him back to the Kingsman shop.
Yeah.
So again, I don't think they don't, Valentine and co, they don't quite know what Kingsman is at this point, but he's obviously got his eye on him now. He's definitely on his radar.
Yeah, and it's no coincidence. I think that's where, obviously, it starts going downhill slightly, doesn't it, for Harry in some respects, because that cool demeanour he's getting tested now, that gentleman side of it, you can see it's wearing thin as we sort of build up towards the sort of end of the film as well.
Yeah. So we learn that, again, this philanthropist, Valentine, he's going to give away all these SIM cards. Again, we don't quite know why. The intelligence organization don't actually know. Again, it takes Eggsy, it takes his street kind of nous to know that, he's giving away all these free SIM cards and whatever. Harry ends up, how does he, I'm trying to think now, how does he come across that church?
Oh, the church?
How does he find out about
it's
the
church? It's a meeting, isn't it? Because he's got that top hat on, hasn't he, Valentine? But he gives away the location because they're like white extremists, aren't they? Where he goes to that sort of, it's like an evangelist type place, isn't it?
Yeah. He's got the tracer on the hat. That's it. So he goes there, and before it all kicks off, I love the line. So Harry's sort of sat there, and it's very clear, these white supremacists are, not very, very nice people. So he goes to get out, and the woman's like, "What's wrong? Why are you going?" It's like, I think he politely tries to get past again, but she's having none of it. So, and I can't do the line justice, but it's something like, I need to go back and meet with my black Jewish boyfriend who we're enjoying Congress with, and he works at an abortion clinic. Hail Satan, and have a lovely day, madam.
He's saying it now as you're saying it. I'm not really saying it, so Hail Satan.
And it's just a brilliant line. I love it because it's just crammed everything that you know is just going to push their buttons, but you can't stop that Englishness at the end of it. You know, have a lovely day, madam.
Yeah. Fucking brilliant. Absolutely. And to be honest, Dave, as I'm watching this, I understand now what's happened. It's a test, isn't it, that whole scene, because he's trying to see if the SIM card thing works.
That's right. And so I'll just say briefly, so in the comics, what they do, they pick on this kind of mass wedding that they have in Hawaii. And so it's the wedding is all these brides and grooms where they do the test and they all just murder each other. Whereas again, I think good choice to move it to this church, I think. And so they're running the test and they're not quite sure at this point because not everyone's got a SIM card.
Yeah.
So, they set off these SIM cards with this noise. Again, at this point, as the viewer watching for the first time, you don't quite know what's going to happen. But this, as Harry's trying to make for the door, this white supremacist woman's sort of chasing after him, giving him a bit of verbals. And then he turns around and then there's a bit of a pause and then just unleashes, basically puts a bullet through her head. And you're like, whoa, what happened there?
I must admit, Dave, I've not seen or been as shocked by watching a film for a sort of turn in the film since the original. Do you ever remember Dusk Till Dawn?
Oh, yeah.
I remember watching that in obviously the 90s, sort of like around 96, 97, and I knew nothing about it. And, obviously George Clooney was just sort of becoming popular then. He was just coming out of ER. And I remember Sam was well into it, and I remember watching it thinking, I don't know what's going on here. And then all of a sudden it went from this sort of weird film where there was two convicts who were with this family, and obviously I could never get it, and then it just went absolute carnage. And this scene for me it's one of the best scenes I've seen in a long time, just for pure comic book. It was almost like a video game, Dave, when you have these zombie apocalypse type situations where you've got hundreds of people coming at what it was just amazing. Absolutely cinema gold for me.
And again, up until that point, all we've seen, in certain stressed out situations or stressful situations, Colin Firth is calmness personified and gentlemanliness personified. Yeah. So then to actually, kill this woman, you're like, whoa, what's going on there?
Yeah.
And then very quickly, I just absolutely love, and there's a few things, isn't there? It's that illusion of just it being one shot. So, just the camera, they use a few tricks, the camera sort of going through, following the action, and then you've got Freebird going away in the background there. Again, just fantastic music choice. And it's just an amazing scene. And like you say, cinema gold, really.
Oh, it's fantastic. Well, actually, Freebird was used, but originally they were going to use Guns N' Roses' November Rain, but it wasn't long enough to get guitar solo. So all Matthew Vaughn did was go on Google and put in long guitar solos, and that was the first one that come up, Freebird, and that's how it ended up being in the film.
Yeah, I mean, I'd heard that as well. He wouldn't have just selected it and gone with it, but I'm sure, after he's Googled it and tried it out and he's just stuck it in there, it's just like, yeah, perfect. If it hadn't have been perfect, I'm sure he is that kind of perfectionist type. He would have kept trying different things, but I do like that. Just Google long guitar solo. Right, that'll do.
Fantastic. And I tell you what was so good about that, and this, being in a band and the music and stuff, but it's the crescendo of the guitar solo, because it's going and going and it's building and building, and the more violent that it got, the guitar solo's tempo changes. But it's obviously that song was done in the 70s, but it's just so perfect for that whole scene. And honestly, Dave, fantastic, absolutely fantastic.
So just as we've been talking there, I've just got the quote here. So, I'm a Catholic who's enjoying Congress with my black Jewish boyfriend, who works at the abortion clinic. Hail Satan and have a lovely day, madam. just absolutely brilliant. Fantastic. But anyway, sorry, I just I couldn't say half of the quote and murder it.
Yeah.
But yeah, so and of course we see Eggsy, don't we? He's watching the action as well, so he's seeing it through Harry's Kingsman glasses, and he's got no idea what's going on. It's just all hell's breaking loose, and you see some absolute, there's not a lot of blood for the amount of limbs and things that are being blown off, but it's still pretty gory stuff, isn't it?
Yeah, it's brilliant, absolutely brilliant, and again, the comic book sort of, these little bits there where there's a bit of fire and he has a bit of blood on his sort of cufflinks, and that's it. Considering he's probably killed about 40 people, there's literally nothing. And this is where, for me, as I said before, it just started dropping in, thinking, yeah, I get why they've done it. It would have been too much, I think, if it'd been blood everywhere. Because in real life, obviously, we know the situation would be, but it was just brilliant. Absolutely.
Yeah, I must admit, I do love that movie as well, but I can kind of empathise. I can see why it turns some people off the movie. Yeah. If that is a bit too much, but again, just in terms of being that gentleman from the past, I say from the past because up until watching this movie, that's just how I saw Colin Firth. I mean, isn't it one of the Bridget Jones movies where he has a bit of a dust-up with Hugh Grant, and it's one of the most pathetic on-screen fights you've ever seen, that was up until I saw Iron Fist, but, it's just to go from that to this, you're just like, crikey, I can't believe it's the same bloke.
No,
and there's just a moment of doubt, isn't there? When there's the exploding cigarette lighter that goes off, and you can see he sort of pauses for a minute as his ears kind of get blocked up, I guess, and he can't hear the frequency that's sending him nuts. But then, sure enough, he's straight back into it, and finishes a few more off before he's essentially killed everyone.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's just brilliant, absolutely brilliant. I mean, obviously, we've had this sort of, I don't know, in some respects, it's a bit of a defining moment in cinema for me. That whole church scene was just amazing, Dave. I've watched some great films over the last couple of years, and I'm sure you have, and I know obviously you've seen this when it first come out, but to see it, I'm kicking myself at this point, thinking, why the heck have I not watched this film before? Just for that scene on its own. It's one of them ones I'll go on YouTube and just watch again and again.
Yeah, it is up there because I've done the same. It just, and again, it's just everything. It's the camera work, it's the editing, and it's the music. It's just brilliant. So as Harry's coming out of the church, because Valentine and co have been watching it, or rather Gazelle's been watching it and sort of saying to Valentine, you need to watch this, but he can't stand violence. So, he's not watching it at all, just saying, how's it going? And that's when we find out, they're getting 100% coverage. So even though everyone doesn't have these special SIM cards, it still affects everyone, and everyone goes absolutely nuts and is trying to kill each other.
Yeah.
And then we get the little nod to the old Bond movies, don't we? Because, what is it? A neuro inhibitor or something like that.
Yeah.
Something like that. And he says, this is where we expect, I'll have a convoluted way of trying to kill you, and you'll find some sort of convoluted way of escaping. But this ain't that kind of movie. And then just blows his head off.
Yeah.
But then, you know, I liked it that, you know, he sort of he sort of winces, doesn't he? And he can't stand violence himself, and he's like, Gazelle's like, doesn't it feel good to kill someone? He's like, no, it feels awful. And then I thought one of the lines that stood out for me, at least, she said something like, "You've just killed all those people in that church." No, they killed each other. So it was just that way he can distance himself. So even though he has killed everyone in that church by his actions, but he doesn't see it that way. So he sees it, you know, he's killed that one person, Harry, and that feels worse to him than just killing, you know, he's saying they've done it to themselves. He doesn't really see what he's doing as being wrong.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's, again, that's what they do, don't they? He's putting all the tools out there and just pushing a couple of buttons, but because he's physically, I agree with that, yeah. That's sign of a good part, though, as well, because it's that sort of flawed genius. He's looking to sort of cleanse the earth and sort of rechange humanity and all that, and he doesn't see that these sort of people's deaths are anything other than collateral damage, really, to get what his end goal is. Yeah, clever.
And then we get, so Eggsy goes back. He meets up with Michael Caine. I can't remember what Michael Caine character is, but it's just Michael Caine in it.
well, what they've said, Dave, is they all wear the glasses, and it's all to do, and that's why I call him first called Harry, because it's a homage to the Ipcress Files, which Michael Caine starred in, and he was called Harry Brown in it, and that's where the glasses come from and everything, and the whole part. And again, like you say, I'm not sure what the situation is there, but there's a funny bit there, because we obviously get the sleight of hand, don't we, when he's pouring in the is it the brandy? He pours in the brandy, doesn't he?
That's right.
And we get the sort of sleight of hand trick. And I must admit, I knew that was coming, and I knew he was going to do. There was something planned at that point. But what I didn't understand was how all of a sudden, the only little bit where I picked a bit of a hole in was Michael Caine's character just changed from being a Kingsman and running this sort of secret agent business to then having a quick conversation with Samuel L. Jackson and letting him obviously see the scar, but letting him sort of implant this scar into him, and all these sort of morals and everything that they stood for years and years just goes out the window over a quick conversation.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I guess I just read it as, you know, you're only seeing on camera a little bit.
Yeah.
You know, you don't know is that a series of like 10 different discussions that have been had. To me, the way I took it as was, you know, firstly, Valentine's a very charismatic character, and, you know, so he's really quite convincing. And so I thought, well, quite possibly, you know, you could have someone like a Michael Caine sort of turn. You know, is it completely plausible? Would he do that? Who knows?
Yeah, true. I mean, Dave, it didn't distract anything from the film at all. It didn't ruin my experience. It was just the one little. I mean, we've listened to the other reviews that we've done, and we've had a bit of a joke, haven't we, and picked holes in it, and I found it very, very hard, and not because I wanted to, because I enjoyed that, but I found it hard in this film to pick any holes in it, really. And that's the only thing I could pick up on, really.
I think at this point for me, again, I didn't really try and take a step back and consider what his motivation would be, because I was just so shocked that he would you know, I was still waiting for Mark Strong to be the bad guy.
Yeah.
You know? Yeah. So when Michael Caine, he's a national treasure, you know, and he turns out to be the double crosser. And I loved it, you know. Yeah, exactly. I loved it, the fact that, you know, because he's been very anti-Eggsy, hasn't he? He's been like, you know, this guy is not, he's not from the right stock. You know, he shouldn't be even up for the place to be a Kingsman. And as he's going out there, "Yeah, a bit of an accent there. You dirty."
Yeah.
And you sort of see that. Oh well, he's probably similar kind of background. He's just playing at being this upper class gentleman.
Yeah, and that's what I got from that, Dave. Exactly the same.
Yeah. No, I thought it was good.
A great scene. And then the next thing is obviously Galahad's died, and we've got Merlin and that, and they regroup, and Eggsy goes back to the house, and it's become apparent that there's only 3 of them left now. Lancelot's there, Roxanne, and they've got to then go and sort of save the day, haven't they, as a team? And I must admit, Dave, I love that little bag he pulls out, like a bit of a sports bag, like a Sports Direct bag. And you've got this Ronald Reagan built War Games contraption that can take you into space. And it looks like a Meccano set. And it's like, yeah, you'll be all right with this, love. You get 35,000 feet in the air, you'll be absolutely fine, and it's just daft little things when it's that artistic license where any sort of rationale or reality, you'd be like, that isn't taking you anywhere near out of this atmosphere. But it just makes for everything a little bit of suspense and sort of intrigue as to what's actually going to happen. Is she going to do it? And obviously, there's going to be a bit of a bump along the way when she's going to fire the rocket, but it just builds for the whole thing and the tension of the film.
Yeah. So they obviously have to come up with the plan, don't they? And that's Roxanne's or Roxy's part, and of course we know she's scared of heights, but she's the one who has to go up, practically into space to shoot out the satellite.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, Merlin's got to be the pilot, and Eggsy, I can't remember the person who he's pretending to be, but he's pretending to be one of the people who can get onto the ark, as it were, and so.
It's Michael Caine, Dave. Sorry to interrupt.
Oh, it's Michael Caine's character, of course. That would make sense. Yeah.
He says use his real name, doesn't he? Is it Chester King? Chester Arthur King, he's called. Yeah. So his name's on the list because obviously he's done a deal, hasn't he, with Valentine.
She's just been half asleep at that moment. So that's obviously why Roxy, I guess, couldn't do that bit. It seemed a bit sadistic to put the one who hates heights up practically into space. So yeah, they obviously get in there, and obviously Eggsy's reveling in it a little bit, isn't he? Because Merlin's been this tough drill sergeant.
Yeah,
to tell him oh, you've graduated from being my pilot to being my valet now, And I must admit, the way this unfolded. Again, there was several times in this when I thought Mark Strong's had it. He's going to die here.
Yeah.
But, yeah, so, I mean, Eggsy gets in initially, doesn't he? But he's found out by Charlie. And so he's because he's of higher class stock, I guess, his family's got in there by default. And so he recognises Eggsy and, the game's almost up kind of thing.
Yeah.
And I guess so what happens next? So Roxanne sort of shoots out the satellite. Is that what happens next?
Yeah, she gets up. Eggsy gets into obviously the thing. He wants a computer, doesn't he? So they can, Mark Strong can sort of have a look into the system and that. Mm-hmm. And then she's got to destroy the satellite, hasn't she? And then it comes to thing where she gets to the point, she's right there as I'm watching it now, and one of the balloons goes just as she's about to press the button, and then we get the whole thing where Charlie obviously pulls a knife, gets hold of him, and then she gets off. But we have this whole scene now, don't we, of just utter carnage. A bit not as powerful as the church scene, but it's, for me, the way Eggsy comes across and that, it's very, very Daniel Craig. James Bond. The way he stands, his movement, the fight scenes, very, very good.
He just grows, doesn't he? Throughout the film, and so we learned a little bit before that there was this biometric switch. So there was only Valentine himself who could actually set this thing off, and so when he does try and set it off, Roxy's knocked out one of the satellites, and we think, there we go. Great plan.
Yeah.
But then he manages to phone up someone, probably Bill Gates or someone like that, and just piggyback on their satellite. So, I mean, Roxy's part of the plan. All it did was delay, really. So that's right. So that's why Eggsy had to go back, doesn't he? And then it's a little bit, again, it kind of looks like that impossible situation, doesn't it? They sort of got a whole bunch of henchmen trapping him in from both sides, and you're thinking, right, this doesn't look good.
Yeah.
But then they kind of find the little device that was in Michael Caine's neck. Merlin does a little bit of wizardry, doesn't he, to basically set them all off. And that's where you get this weird kind of, over the top scene where basically everyone with these implants suddenly, Mark Strong set them off, Merlin set them off. And then we get this operatic kind of moment where all these heads are just blowing off to this opera music.
Oh, it's fantastic. Absolutely fantastic. And that's where the penny drops. I know we've been building up for this a bit over the podcast day, but it's where the whole thing drops of that is absolutely brilliant. Comic book satire and sort of comic book, because there's not a lot, like you said, when they adapted it, obviously they've slightly changed the comics. They changed, Kingsman was never in the comics. Harry was not his. He was his uncle in the comics, and obviously they changed all that. He became like his dad's friend and all this. But this at the end, it's very, very difficult. And you're a comic book fan more than I obviously am. But to sort of portray it in a way that doesn't distract from, and I've not read the comics, but sort of what a comic is about was brilliant. With that sort of imagination and that to use it in a film, I thought was fantastic.
Yeah. Actually, in the comic, they managed to alter the frequency, so everyone, instead of trying to kill each other, just ends up getting quite passionate with each other. Really quite a different angle on it there.
Yeah, just a little bit.
Yeah, but then we get the showdown that we've been waiting for, don't we? So we get Eggsy and Gazelle, quite well matched there, but Eggsy kind of wins out with his little poison-tipped shoe dagger or whatever that was called, and so he wins out there and he managed to take one of her prosthetic limbs off and use it as a bit of a javelin to take out Valentine. And of course, in doing that, we probably haven't mentioned, have we? The satellites had joined up, and of course he set this SIM card bomb off essentially, and everyone's madly trying to kill each other. So the beach scene and the baseball game, that whole mass violence, because the camera is quite far away. I don't think it resonates, say, quite as much as like the church scene.
Yeah.
But what was quite haunting, and again, both you and I are parents, was Eggsy's mum going, full shining at the door, trying to get to the daughter.
Yeah.
And, it's weird, isn't it? The comic book violence, it's so ridiculous. It's so over the top. It just goes over your head, really, or goes over my head. But when it flashed to her, and you think, oh, crikey, can you just imagine? And when the SIM card goes off, how do you live with yourself? And so I felt like I'd personally, emotionally sort of jumped from that comic book violence, bit of a laugh, bit silly, to crikey, that's horrible.
Yeah, it really is. And it's funny because a friend of mine actually said to me, I was going to let my kids watch this because he thought it was a comic book adaptation, not knowing what it was about, really.
Right.
You couldn't. I mean, Dave,
expecting Superman to wander across, or someone with spandex.
Yeah, you're not going to have someone in this going kneel before there's none of that going on. It's just it's so far extreme, but this is where proper comic book stuff comes from as well, doesn't it, Dave? Because you've got these sort of comics where it really is violent. It's not all Superman saving.
Absolutely. I mean, we're just. I mean, we're episode 4 now.
Yeah,
we've got a long journey to go, and I think you'll be pleasantly surprised on the diversity of some of the comics. And as I said about Millar at the start, one of his talents is making his comics quite cinematic, but he's not the only one. And you've got within that comic book space, you've got all kinds of different stories and genres within themselves. So yeah, I think that there's lots and lots of different types of things, and you wouldn't probably associate it with being a comic. And the main advantage comics have got is that you can roll them out fairly cheaply. Yeah. I mean, I'm sure Dave Gibbons wasn't that cheap, and Mark Millar himself, he needs to pay himself. But compared to making a movie, it's a lot cheaper. So, you can get these things out and then, probably get people interested and say, oh, yeah, I sort of see what this can be, and, bring it forward to being a movie.
Yeah, yeah. And it must be a totally, I know obviously we reviewed, but for someone to create that idea in their head and to see it sort of not only go on to sort of a paper form and then go onto a screen, it must be a hell of a sense of achievement.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I honestly believe that by watching this, that they've done, they did such a good job. I don't think any comic sort of book fan or nerd, as you say, would have a problem with the film, to be honest.
No, and like I say, if you read those 6 issues, or like I say, it's collected in a graphic novel, the beats are very similar. The way the story goes, the details are different. They make different artistic choices, but it's if you boil it down, its essence is very, very much the same.
Yeah.
So, I mean, we'd gone off on a little bit of a tangent there, so we'll pick it up again where Eggsy kind of uses the prosthetic limb. He sort of straightens it out, uses it as a javelin to take out Valentine, and that obviously releases this SIM card bomb, and so everyone kind of goes back to normal, and true to form, he sort of sees his own blood, yeah, and then vomits everywhere because he can't stand the sight of blood there.
Yeah.
But what we sort of skipped over as well is when it looked pretty perilous. Eggsy had stumbled across the princess, didn't they? And being a little bit of a cheeky chappy, he sort of says, "Well, if I save the world, can I have a kiss?" And let's just say she says, "Yep," and a bit more than that as well.
Yep.
So he says, "Right, but I'll sort of be back." And then when he does save the world, he goes in to cash his chips.
Yeah, and I believe that the code on the door is in reference to the cashing of the chips, but we will just get over that very quickly, Dave, from our research.
So, I mean, you see as well, again, just a brilliant comedy moment, but, in all of the euphoria of saving the day and whatever, you kind of forget that the old Kingsman glasses, Merlin can see everything, can't he? So, yeah. He's sort of sat there back on the plane, and he's like, oh dear, close that over. Yeah, just a great nod and a wink, really, to those old Bond movies.
Exactly, because I love James Bond, and I'm sure you do, and I've sat there and I've watched them hundreds of times, Dave. And when you watch it now, even over the last, say, I'm 39 years old, even probably all my adult life, you still watch him thinking, you know what, he's pretty much a chauvinist, James Bond, you know what I mean? But as a kid, it's even worse when you watch the older ones now, because you're thinking, oh my word, how's he getting away with that? Because it's very, very sexist stuff, really. But this is like a nod to it, them films, and tenfold. And in that respect, it's also a good nod, towards how now, and quite rightly, female actors and actresses are treated the same, and they should be, whereas years ago they were always seen as sort of like this weaker character, weren't they? Where that's not the case. I mean, Gazelle is one of the best characters in the film, and like Black Panther last week, it's really, really, really well done, and it's not done in a way where it's like that's disgraceful. It's not. It's actually disrespecting men, really, because it's going the other way, saying how bad things were then. So I thought it was really good. Good little thing, good little spot.
Yeah, and I think just to have a slight tangent. So I think when Daniel Craig took over the role, he did it at an interesting time, didn't he? Because I remember at the time there was lots of talk that the James Bond franchise, it's just a relic of the past. It hasn't dated particularly well. If you look back at it, certainly now with, say, 2018 eyes, some of the things in there just don't age well. It is pretty chauvinistic and a bit old-fashioned. We're watching it through those nostalgic lenses, so we don't quite pick up on everything. Yeah. But, for the Bond franchise, at least, they had kind of updated it pretty well, I thought. But I thought Kingsman did a brilliant job of just, making the movie fun, but also giving a nod and a wink, to those old spy movies as well.
Yeah. I think everything about the film, Dave, was just fantastic. And sometimes you've just got to hold your hands up and go, you know what? It just was so good. Sometimes, whether it's intentional or not, and they have obviously an idea of how it's going to play out on screen, but everything just worked. The characters were right. Even down to his stepdad, who looked like he'd come off Green Street or, one of these bloody football hooligan things. He was just so well made. He just made the part.
Yeah, I mean, his dad and his other local hooligans, I mean, they acted a pretty good job of being characters you really want to hate, don't they?
Yes. Yeah.
All of them did a bang-up job of that.
Yeah, and the guy who's his stepdad, he's in a lot of the stuff like Green Street 2 and all these B movies. He's never been a massive actor, but he's always played that menacing bad guy, like sort of Cockney bad guy. And it just, for some reason, it just worked in this film. And it was so good. Yeah. It was so good. Yeah, he was a good character.
And of course, the only thing we've not talked about there is that end credit. So when we see Eggsy go back and sort of meet up with his stepdad and his mum in the pub,
yeah,
and we get a bit of a replay, don't we, of the manners maketh the man scene from earlier.
Yeah,
and so we kind of see him. He's been on his journey. He's come up from this background. He said, hasn't he, that if we were born with a silver, I'll use Colin Firth's words, with a silver suppository.
Yeah.
Just brilliant line. He'd do just as well as them, and he's proved right. So he comes back, that gentleman. He's telling his mum he's gonna take her away because he's got a house for them and stuff, and so sort of bring her away from this environment that he's been in.
Yeah, brilliant.
So, yeah, I'd like I say, when I watched it for the first time, I was blown away by it. Absolutely loved it, and I guess do you? I think I went first last time. So do you want to wrap up? What your thoughts are on it, and
and the score
rating.
I've had it running while we've been watching, while we've been reviewing, and I've gone a bit forward on some of the things. Obviously, we've not run it as long as the film. And when I initially watched it last night, Dave, I watched the whole thing. I thought it was absolutely fantastic. And you can tell that because there's nothing, and I don't, like I said, I'm not going to keep coming on here and intentionally picking films apart, but if something doesn't sort of fit, even the Superman stuff, as you know, my favourite film, there's still little things in there that made us laugh, and you're like, yep, you're right, you know what, why was that in it? It didn't make sense. as I've watched it again, I had a score last night, and I said to Sam, I watched it, and I said, you know what? I said, that was a fantastic film. I said, everything worked on it, from the comic book inception to the comic book over the top kills to the sort of, as I said, the Dusk Till Dawn fight scene in the church. It just was a total curveball in some respects, and the mayhem that ensued, but also that sort of real sort of in-jokes, over-the-top innuendos, different things that were paying homage. I love films that pay homage to other films, you know, and I give it a score last night of 4 out of 5. But Dave, I'm going for it this time, and I don't want people thinking that we're just going to start throwing top scores out time and time again, because obviously it doesn't give us a lot of credence. But I've got to give it an Asgard, Dave, 5 out of 5. It is absolutely brilliant film.
When we talked last week, you know, we were going to review this one. I thought, well, is it going to stand up if I rewatch it? Because I when it first came out on DVD as well, watched it a couple of times then, and so I thought, well, if I rewatch it, will I still think the same? And absolutely, I do. I absolutely enjoyed it. Not quite as much as the first time, or not that I didn't enjoy it as much, but obviously you know the twists and turns that are coming, so you're expecting them rather than being surprised by them.
Yeah.
But same again for me. I'm going 2 in a row. I'm going straight to Asgard for this one.
Yeah, I can't disagree with you, Dave. I know there was a few things last week with Black Panther, as I mentioned, but it was just a bit of me, this film. And I agree with you. I think the one thing we do need to do is, for our sort of sanity and for the reliability of the reviews, we can't just be giving 5 out of 5s out every single one. But this is a film that I'd stand up against anyone saying it's got to be. It's just got to be. You know, and like you did last week with Black Panther and IDB Superman 2, they're just there for a reason, these films. And it just took me by surprise how good it was.
Yeah. No, and I'm delighted you enjoyed it. And like I say, I kind of went in knowing mine was probably going to be a high score. It was either going to be from 3 to 5, let's say, depending on how I felt going through that rewatch. And maybe, like I say, we need to spread them out a little bit more, the really good ones.
Yeah. And I know as well, we were talking, because we've had a lot of traction on the Twitter account because of Black Panther and the stats I put up about Wesley Snipes being in there, that people want us to do Blade as a review. And, you know, I love that film. Yeah.
And I that would be interesting, because I haven't seen a lot of Blade. Probably, I want to say 10 years, but I'm thinking it's probably the original. It's probably a lot longer than that. It's probably more like 15 years since I've seen it last. And so it'd be interesting if that one does actually stand up.
Yeah.
But we can talk offline about whether we do that for the next show.
Yes.
Or, you know, let's discuss what we do for the next one.
Yeah.
Because I kind of feel like we have to watch Batman 66 or something, you know, just to stop us front loading all the great movies that we're going to love and give 4s and 5s to. I think it'd be an interesting talk as well, wouldn't it, to go back to some of the ones that we know aren't going to be great as well.
Yeah, and if we've changed our perception of that, you know, because obviously I like the fact that I can watch older stuff and then see the references in the newer sort of remakes or newer films within that world. I like that sort of thing, the little crossovers and stuff where you really got to look out for an Easter egg without having to go online and you actually spot it straight away and go, oh yeah. And then I've sat there with Sam and said, Sam's obviously my wife, and I say to her, right, oh, did you see that? And she hasn't got a clue what I'm talking about, you know, because obviously it means something to me and you as fans of the comic book world and the, you know, the comic book films and TV. And I just like that. So I agree. Well, maybe we need to do that and go back and look at some older ones.
Yeah. Okay. Have you got any if we wrap it up there, have you got any plugs for us, Chris?
Of course, yes. I have my other podcast again, which is the Contextual Podcast. You can catch me on Twitter at ContextualPod1 or at the Contextual Podcast. YouTube is Contextual Podcast. And if anyone's got any questions, if they listen to the episodes, give me an email at the contextualpodcast@gmail.com. Just talk about gaming, life, MMA. I've started an MMA weekly show now as well under the same banner. We have guests on quite regularly. Episode 31 is as long as you're not sick of me and Dave talking, is me and Dave talking about his gaming timeline and a few other things. So give us a shout, yeah. How about yourself, Dave?
Yeah, so we're going to be recording over the weekend for the Grassroots Coach Cast. So there we focus on grassroots soccer or football coaching. And we've got quite a serious subject at the weekend. So we're going to be interviewing one of the female players for Cambridge about depression in sports. So we're going to be talking to her about her book and just about, handling depression and for those high performing athletes.
Yeah.
Okay. Should we wrap up there then?
Yeah, one thing I would say, Dave, before we go, also with ourselves, you can contact us if you've got any questions on
I always forget about that bit.
Yeah, I forgot last week. That's why I've said it, because I forgot when I listened back. You can contact us on our social media, which is on Twitter, is at Comics in Motion P, and you can email us at comicsinmotionpodcast@gmail.com. So any questions, anything you want us, even if you've got any upcoming reviews of things you'd like us to do, we're always open for that. We sort of decide on what we're doing each episode after we've done the preceding, like we've just done this today. So we'll decide in the next couple of days what we're going to do for next week.
Yeah. So we've got about 2.5 years worth of backlog to work through, but we can obviously move those movies up and down the list. What we might do, I think we want to get a few more. We want to really find a rhythm with these reviews as we're going through. But what we might do some weeks is like throw it out and just maybe have a Twitter poll or something. Next week, would you like us? Which one of these 4 movies do you think we should review?
Yeah, good idea.
We could do something like that.
Yeah, that's a good idea, actually, Dave. I think that gives a bit of validity to what we're doing as well, because we're not just cherry picking stuff we like as well. It can be anything, because there's plenty of films on the list that we've generated together that I've never seen. So I've got, and I'm sure you're the same, whether it be a TV series or a film. One thing we will probably discuss as well regarding that is if we're going to do a Netflix binge, like obviously Jessica Jones 2 has just released.
Yeah,
Netflix is one, how we do the format. Do we binge watch it over a series of weeks and then do it as one general review, or do we do it in stages? I'm not sure, because it's a lot different than just doing a film.
Yeah, and I was thinking earlier today, I feel a lot of pressure. The way Netflix releases their the shows all in one go. I think initially, certainly when that first Daredevil came out, it was absolutely brilliant. I could just straight away, I'm watching it at my own pace.
Yeah.
But then you see that people actually go ahead and do it all in one sitting, don't they?
Yeah.
So, and then it's a case of, right, well, I don't want to be spoiled. I need to stay away from Twitter and Facebook and everything, until I can watch it at my own time.
Yeah, and I must admit that ruins it. I mean, I'll tell you what we could do, Dave, as we're talking about the Netflix stuff. Why don't we just review Iron Fist? I'm sure that'll drop the scores down anyway.
It could do. I mean, I did you watch the whole season? Did you watch the whole series?
I got to about episode 8 and just give up. That Danny Randall guy just did nothing for me at all.
Yeah, I'm a completionist, and so I made it. But, even about halfway through the 13th episode, I'm thinking it's going to get good. At some point, it's going to get good.
It's just, I think I could have choreographed better punches on that day. I've never seen a film like it or a TV show like it.
Yeah. So, yeah, we should definitely do that. I'm not sure I've got the appetite to binge watch 13 hours of it, but
I don't think I have either, to be honest.
Yeah. But yeah, you're right. I mean, we need to figure out how we're going to handle that format. And that'd be tough to... We're struggling to keep the time down on our episodes now with 1.5, 2 hour movies, aren't we? So
yeah.
I don't know how we'll do with 13 hours.
It could be a 24-hour sponsored marathon or something. Podcast.
Yeah.
But no, it's been great this week, Dave, and thanks again. I've really enjoyed this. And thanks for putting me onto the Kingsman, because it's going to be one of these, I'm going to look out for, and I'll probably buy this on a special edition Blu-ray. I don't buy a lot of them now, but it deserves my money. I enjoyed it that much.
Well, look at you. I mean, there's obviously a second one as well, so I'm sure we'll give this franchise a rest on the show. But of course, there's nothing stopping you from going and watching that as well. And what you don't get with the second one is the shock factor, because you go in and you know what you're expecting. It'd be like watching, From Dusk Till Dawn 2 or something like that.
Yeah.
You know what it's about then.
Yeah.
Kingsman, The Golden Circle is a lot better than From Dusk Till Dawn 2, by the way, though.
Yeah, it's a terrible film.
It is. But still, I love that one as well. So I'd recommend watching that one as well.
Oh, that's great. But yeah, so this has been episode 4 of the Comics in Motion podcast. I've been Chris Phelps. Had a great time, and we'll see you again next time.
Thanks a lot, guys. Bye now.
As a good friend once said, manners make a man. So, are we going to stand around here all day? Or are we going to fight?
Well, this ain't that kind of movie.
Catholic whore, currently enjoying Congress out of wedlock with my black Jewish boyfriend who works in a military abortion clinic. So hail Satan and have a lovely afternoon, madam.